You have big goals for 2026, right? Get fit, start a business, learn a language. But let me tell you the harsh truth. You said the same thing in 2025 and 2024, and you failed. Not because you are lazy, but because your dopamine receptors are fried. You are trying to run a marathon with a broken leg. Before you write your New Year's resolutions, you need to fix your brain chemistry. Here is the scientific 21-day protocol to reset your dopamine and finally reclaim your life. Phase 1. The diagnosis. Why you feel bored without your phone. Dopamine is not a guilt trip. It's a chemistry party in your head, and your phone is the DJ. Every ping, every like, every notification becomes a little target for your brain's learning circuit, signaling something good just happened and you should do that again. The problem isn't merely wanting to scroll. It's that frequent hits train you to demand novelty on demand. When there's no screen nearby, boredom arrives like a wet blanket, and you notice it with a jolt. The tolerance spike happens because the brain recalibrates to high intensity, frequent rewards. Over time, plain old tasks feel flat, and you reach for the device not to be entertained but to confirm that something worthwhile is still happening somewhere. It's not weakness, it's biology wearing a shiny new costume. The reward system gets trained by patterns more than by content. Apps exploit variable rewards, the uncertain payoff that keeps you scrolling longer. The result is a lower baseline dopamine tone for everyday activities, so ordinary tasks feel dull and uninteresting. Sleep can suffer because blue light from screens suppresses melatonin, making it harder to fall asleep and stay rested. The end product looks like a fried circuit board, fast bursts of stimulation, followed by a crash, and a brain asking for yet more stimulus to feel any spark at all. And yes, most resolutions fail not because people are lazy, but because biology keeps pulling you back toward the same pattern you trained it into. The brain wants predictability, small rewards, and constant cues. Breaking that loop takes deliberate, structured interruption. Here's a practical 21-day map to reset the wiring for 2026. Days 1 to 3 focus on diagnosis. Track every phone interaction for a full 24 hours. Keep a short log. What were you doing? What just happened? How strong was the urge on a 1 to 10 scale? Days 4 to 7 start trimming the appetite. Turn on Do Not Disturb during key blocks, set a grayscale mode if your device has it, and place the phone in another room for 2-hour windows. Create a predictable check-in only, twice an hour, instead of constant glances. Days 8 to 14 shift into rebuilding the baseline with non-digital fuel. A daily walk, a book, a hobby that doesn't involve a screen, and a strict bedtime routine. Add morning light exposure to reset circadian rhythms, plus 15 minutes of mindfulness or journaling to practice noticing urges without acting on them. Days 15 to 21 test boundaries with intention. Reintroduce subtle tech use, but with clear rules. No scrolling during meals, no phone during conversations, and a hard cap on total screen time. Maintain tech-free zones, like a designated lounge or desk, and reward progress with non-digital rewards. If cravings spike, lean on the support system you already built. The goal isn't misery, it's to swap high-frequency, low-signal hits for longer, more meaningful engagement with the world. And yes, you'll stumble, that's the point. The plan is to shorten the urge, not pretend it doesn't exist. Phase 2. The monk mode, days 1 to 7. Cutting off all cheap dopamine sources. Cutting off cheap dopamine sources triggers recalibration in the brain's reward system. Phase 2, commonly dubbed monk mode, runs 7 days to force your brain to relearn slower, more meaningful rewards. During this week you block easy hits, social feeds, binge watching, endless scrolling, gaming marathons, impulsive porn consumption, and snack runs with added sugar. Expect friction, a drumbeat of restlessness, and nights when the urge to pick up the phone feels louder than your tasks. It will feel like withdrawal, not a pep talk. Day 1 is about unplugging. Disable non-essential notifications, hide the phone, and keep devices out of sight during work blocks. Map a rigid schedule with 2 or 3 focus periods and a couple of short breaks. When the urge to scroll hits, lean on a physical cue, a timer, a rubber band on your wrist, or a walk to the window. Day 2 tightens the leash. Build a simple routine you actually can stick to. Begin at the same wake time, spend the first hour on a boring but honest task, and cap the day with a walk outdoors. If you crave dopamine, reach for a 10-minute editing sprint or a quick cleanup of a workspace. Small wins count. Day 3 adds movement, because biology loves motion. A brisk 20 to 30 minutes outside, sunlight if possible, and a short, structured workout. Hydration stays high. Meals stay mindful. Your evenings avoid loud screens. Swap in a book or a puzzle. Day 4 keeps the focus on brain hygiene. Journal the day. What was easy? What bit back? Where the old craving showed up. Practice a 5-minute breathing exercise when a craving arrives. Then redirect to a concrete task. Day 5 tests your commitment with a social swap. Inform a close friend that you're in monk mode and ask for support. Choose low dopamine activities for social time. Coffee chats, a short walk, over collective doom scrolling. Day 6 reinforces the turn toward deliberate living. Audit your environment again. Remove tempting triggers. Reconfigure your physical space to reward focus. Day 7 is a natural close to this week. Do a full weekend review. What changed? What stayed hard? Where the cravings show up. Plan the transition to the next phase with the same honesty you started with. If you're wondering why this stuff sticks, it's not that you're broken. 99% of resolutions fail because of biology. The brain loves novelty. It craves quick hits. Repeated exposure to easy rewards trains a hungry, unreliable default mode. When you pull the plug, the system throws a fit. The fried circuit board effect is real for a while. Then the brain recalibrates, restoration begins, and a taste for slower, meaningful wins starts to feel less like torture and more like competence. Phase 3. The withdrawal symptoms. Why your brain will scream at you to open TikTok. Your brain is wired to chase novelty, and when you yank the dopamine plug, withdrawal shows up as a tug-of-war with your own attention. Dopamine isn't just pleasure juice. It's a signal for salience and motivation. When you flood the system with instant rewards, the circuit learns to expect that hit. Take that hit away, and the brain throws a hissy fit. Sleepless nights, restlessness, and a brain that keeps whispering, just a quick peek, emerge like uninvited guests. This is not moral failure. It's biology doing push-ups in the dark. TikTok and similar platforms deploy intermittent reinforcement, rarely giving you a full dopamine rush, but often enough to keep you hooked. Your baseline dopamine becomes recalibrated downward, so even small ordinary activities feel dull in comparison. Cues become a trigger train, a notification glow, a coffee break, a moment of boredom. That's why 99% of resolutions fail, not because you're intrinsically lazy, but because the system is fighting you with biology. The dopamine dip after a sprint of digital stimuli makes ordinary life look bland, so willpower alone collapses under the load. Phase 3 is where the real test lands. Expect restlessness and irritability to show up first. Sleep may wobble, dreams could be louder, waking up with a sense of I should have checked. Concentration can feel like trying to read in a crowded bar. Cravings arrive as intrusive thoughts that scream for a peek at the feed. The trick is to ride these waves rather than drown in them. Here's how to handle the withdrawal. First, anchor your environment. Remove high salience triggers. Second, ride the urge with urge surfing. Observe the craving without acting on it, give it a timer, and then shift action. Third, replace the habit with something bite-sized but healthier. A brisk walk, stretches, or journaling. Fourth, keep a sleep routine consistent. Blue light after dusk is a magnet for trouble. Fifth, nourish the brain with steady meals and hydration. Finally, remind yourself that progress isn't perfect. The goal is to reduce the pull, not to pretend you'll never look again. The practical path for days 1 to 3. Map urges, delete non-essential apps, establish fixed wake times. Days 4 to 7. Introduce replacements like a grounding object. Days 8 to 14. Add aerobic activity and practice urge surfing. Days 15 to 21. Automate boundaries and create a relapse plan. You're not quitting forever. You're resetting the signal so the brain can enjoy the real world without needing the instant hit every time. Phase 4. Resensitization. Days 8 to 14. Rediscovering the joy of simple things. Dopamine pathways start retuning during the middle stretch of a reset. The brain shifts from craving novelty to resensing what used to be pleasant without a constant zing of stimulus. It's not fireworks. It's a dimmer switch finding its balance. You may notice walking feels restorative, a page of text becomes engaging, a wall can hold your gaze with a strange, quiet meaning. The fried circuit board feeling comes from dopamine systems that have been wired for fast hits. When you pull back, those circuits rebound, then demand proper rest. Rediscovering simple things requires effort, but the payoff is practical and lasting. Walking becomes a small ceremony. Reading a page becomes a coherent experience. Staring at a wall becomes a low-stimulus reset. You'll notice your attention returning to mundane tasks, and with that comes a surprising increase in patience. A single conversation can feel richer. Here's a practical plan to wire in this resensitization. Start by carving out predictable, low-stimulus routines. Days 1 to 7, set the stage with intention. Create a daily baseline of 30 minutes of low-stimulus activities. Days 8 to 10, reintroduce mild, reliable pleasures like longer walks or reading physical material. Days 11 to 12, deepen attentional focus. Choose one activity and do it longer with full attention. Days 13 to 14, embrace intentional sensory rest. Sit with a single scene and describe it in your own words. Days 15 to 17, consolidate gains with structure. Keep a pleasure inventory of simple activities. Days 18 to 21, integrate and prepare for ongoing maintenance. By the end, the brain should show clearer responsiveness to ordinary pleasures. It's a gradual resensitization that rebuilds the bridge between effort and reward. This is the reboot that makes those months of buzz fade into the background, letting real life take center stage. Phase 5, building new pathways, days 15 to 21. Replacing scrolling with creation. Phase 5 leans into neuroplasticity, teaching your mind to rewire itself through sustained, deliberate effort. The circuits that used to crave novelty can be nudged toward producing something visible. The high-effort dopamine rule means you earn dopamine by making something that exists outside your head: an article, a sketch, a short song, a meal plated with care. Start small enough to begin, but demand enough lift to feel earned. For each day, pick one high-effort task and one low-friction companion habit. For example, a 20-minute writing sprint followed by a 5-minute review. Set up a dedicated creation station, an uncluttered desk, a timer, a notebook. If your phone keeps finding you, turn on a block for distractions. Why most resolutions fail isn't laziness. It's biology wearing a mask. Long-term goals fight with fatiguing effort, and the dopamine system resists slow change unless you weaponize structure. You can rewire it by making effort part of the daily weather. Day 15, audit triggers and preempt them with creation. Day 16, establish a dedicated creation routine. Day 17, push for 20 minutes of intense work with a sharp end product. Day 18, add friction to the scrolling habit. Day 19, use accountability. Tell a friend what you're making. Day 20, assemble a small portfolio of 3 artifacts this week: 1 written, 1 drawn, 1 recorded. Day 21, close the loop with reflection and a plan to maintain the rhythm. The dopamine spike from a finished piece feels cleaner than the hit from a constant feed, and that difference compounds. By the end, the screen isn't the default lullaby anymore. It becomes the occasional spectator to your real work. Phase 6, the 2026 strategy. How to maintain this state and actually achieve your resolutions. Your brain doesn't flip a switch simply because you decide to detox. Dopamine is a learning signal that builds habits by watching cues, actions, and rewards. When you've spent months chasing novelty from screens, the baseline shifts. Most resolutions fail not because discipline vanishes, but because the system evolves to resist long-term benefit in favor of immediate tease. You don't convince the brain to stay on task. You redesign the terrain so staying on task becomes the path of least resistance. Remove easy triggers. Replace them with deliberate friction. Implement habit stacking. Pair a new, simple action with something you already do. Tie rewards to intrinsic satisfaction rather than external applause. Here's a 21-day plan to fix the brain for 2026. Day 1, do a full cue audit. Day 2, design your rainproof routine. Day 3, remove one high-signal cue from your bedroom. Day 4, replace a mindless screen moment with breathing. Day 5, implement a 2-minute rule for any new habit. Day 6, daylight exposure first thing in the morning. Day 7, write a simple implementation intention. When X happens, I will do Y. Day 8, create a Friday wind-down ritual. Day 9, add one physical cue that reminds you of the goal. Day 10, do a 15-minute digital reset block. Day 11, try a 24-hour tech pause. Day 12, practice delayed gratification. Day 13, log your small wins. Day 14, refine your morning routine. Day 15, introduce a single healthy habit. Day 16, map out your week with explicit time blocks. Day 17, keep a short, honest reflection. Day 18, reward the process itself. Day 19, renegotiate expectations. Day 20, test a social accountability loop. Day 21, perform a final readout. You don't need to become the hero who never slips. You need to become the engineer who knows how to reset. Phase 7, the relapse trap. What to do when you slip up. Relapse isn't a moral verdict. It's a biology textbook moment. 99% of attempts fail not because you're lazy, but because the brain loves comfort zones. Phase 7 is what you face when you slip up. A familiar double feature. The cue hits, the urge fires, the reward lands, and you're back at the start line. There is honesty in noticing what happened, labeling the craving, and choosing a safer next action. Slippage isn't victory or defeat, it's data. Step 1. Remove shame. Step 2. Separate the behavior from your identity. I accessed the app, I scrolled, I can change what I do next. Step 3. Neutralize the trigger. Step 4. Ride the urge. Step 5. Rebuild quickly. Step 6. Accountability without shaming. To survive Phase 7. Days 1 to 3. Establish a clean baseline. Days 4 to 7. Build structure and low dopamine routines. Days 8 to 14. Intensify the habit architecture. Days 15 to 21. Consolidate and future-proof. Design your environment to reward the non-screen life just as your brain rewards novelty online. In the end, the goal isn't flawless willpower. It's a durable, low-stress rhythm. Don't let 2026 be another blur of scrolling. Wake up. Dopamine isn't just the feel-good switch. It's a motivation signal. Habits solidify through a loop. Cue, routine, reward. Don't let 2026 be another blur of scrolling. This is not a mystical reset trick. It's biology meeting practical changes. So start with simple, concrete steps. If you sleep with your phone, you're handing the brain a constant dopamine appetizer. The New Year edition isn't a magic wand. It's an engineered environment. Here's a practical 21-day plan written like a reality check. First 3 days, remove the easy triggers. Install a digital sunset rule. No screens at least 2 hours before bed. Replace scrolling with a cheap, real-life substitute. By day 3, you should see the first traction. Days 4 through 7 are about rebuilding the routine with intention. Days 8 to 14 escalate to deeper focus. Days 15 to 21 are about consolidation and sustainability. The end goal isn't perfection. It's a more deliberate relationship with technology. Resolutions fail not because you're lazy, but because the system is set up to reward quick dopamine hits. Wake up, reset, and give 2026 a chance to be different. One focus moment at a time. That's a wrap on Dopamine Detox 2026. Reset your brain, New Year edition. If you stuck with me, here's the brutal truth. 99% of resolutions fail not because you're lazy, but because biology set up shop in your brain. We detox to cool the flames, then we rewire the loop so the cues and rewards line up with sane goals. Direct summary of the key points. Biology is leaning against you. A 21-day reset can reshape baseline rewards. Environment beats willpower. Now, onto the practical bit. The 21-day plan to reboot for 2026. First 3 days are about clearing the stage. Porque non essential apps. Days 4 through 7 are about adding friction and structure. Set a 60-minute no screens after 10 p.m. rule. Days 8 through 14 are about stacking habits and reinforcing the new baseline. Days 15 through 21 are consolidation and testing. Endgame. You want to wake up with a brain that's not begging for a new hit by noon. Key takeaways. This isn't about moral resistance. It's biology meeting environment. You're building a brain that can be in control without being coldly efficient. If this lands, drop a comment with your 21-day plan and the one cue you're changing first. Like, share with a friend who needs a brain upgrade, and subscribe if you want to see how this actually plays out in real life. I'm counting on you to show up for the next phase, not just the hype. And yes, more is coming. In the next videos, we'll dive into the sleep dopamine loop. Here's to a sharper brain, braver choices, and a new year that doesn't require a heroic sprint to feel sane. See you in the next chapter.